There's only one way, one God, one body, one faith alone. If you don't know, then you need to be told. Welcome back to Build Theory. I'm Aurian Archive, and give me a minute while we actually set up some actual music in the background. And today's stream, or the stream right now, is a qualitative response stream to someone who had some questions about the Spine's Dark build that I streamed yesterday. And excuse me for a second. The coughing and the sneezing isn't getting much better. Anyways, so uh, there were definitely questions about, well, why did you skip this power? Why did you skip that power? I love that power. Why did you skip it? And I figured that in order to try and explain why I skipped it on the Scrapper, I would pull out my Dark Tank. Now, my Dark Tank does have the power in question that was skipped, which in this case is Oppressive Gloom. Now, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Oppressive Gloom. When you are making a leveling build, that is to say, you are leveling up your character, Oppressive Gloom can buy you a significant amount of performance capability. And here's how it works is that when you are running Oppressive Gloom, and we'll go ahead and just turn it on, and we'll go find something, we'll turn Death Shroud off so these guys don't immediately go splat. And you can see that they've now, or at least Graveyard Slugger there, woozing around. And as we stay in range long enough, the others will also start getting a little woozy. And that's because what Oppressive Gloom does is it stuns opponents that are in melee range, and we've got a 8-foot radius. So we bring up Death Shroud, we look at Death Shroud, it's got an 8-foot radius as well. So basically anything that can be touched by your toggles will potentially be stunned by Oppressive Gloom. The trade-off is you lose health while doing that. Now, for some archetypes, such as Scrappers, Oppressive Gloom can be as much as a hindrance as a help. You go into a mob of enemies and you lose more hit points from the stun effect. And does it actually give us a metric that we can look at? Okay, 5.28 special damage on the tank, and looking at the Scrapper, let's log off Oppressive Gloom, and doesn't here actually give us an effect of what the minus HP points, how much it actually attacks the player for. Okay. So bringing it back here is on the Scrapper build. There's other factors to consider, and in City of Heroes, the primary consideration, the consideration over everything else, is soft cap. That is to say, once you reach a certain amount of defensive performance, once you are at a certain level of and it depends on what you are fighting. Give me a second. I'm hitting the fire base. Alright. As you get, and I've talked about this in previous streams, once you get to 45% defense, and that's to bringing up defense, looking at defense, let's bring it to the middle. Alright, power sources. You have ranged melee, AoE smashing, lethal, fire, cold, energy, negative energy, psionic, toxic. Let's turn that down for a second. Not sure it'll work, but alright. Once you have 45% defense to a specific type, you are at the maximum of the minimum of how much damage can be taken. And this is one where it really needs a dedicated Impress slideshow, drawing boxes to understand the concepts of why the math works like it does. I don't really want to go into the math because I really want to just talk about the armor and the power choices. Once you hit soft caps, once you hit 45% against all non-incarnate target, you will be taking the minimum amount of attacks. Now, there are caveats to that, and we're going to one of those caveats right now. We are in the Storm Palace. And out here, we have a Veluru. And as you can see, these guys are conning white and yellow and blue to me. Not really a threat. And we'll let them load up some attacks. Okay, we will let them try and load up some attacks. Come on, I thought you guys did defense debuff. I don't have any way to check their power as I'm not picking up any debuffs from these guys. Am I just that overpowered? It could be I'm just that overpowered. Alright, let's see if we can find some watchers. Squall, squall, squall. Here's some watchers or observers. Alright, there we go. And as we can see, the defense is falling. We're now at negative 36.8% defense. And, okay, now we're at minus 54% defense. And this is the thing. When you're fighting against various enemies that can take defense away, simply having soft cap is not enough. When you fight enemies with debuffs, being able to live through the debuffs and have other powers to call on is kind of important. And on Dark Armor, Oppressive Gloom is one of the strongest fallback powers. And so it's very useful on tanks, on brutes, on armor types and characters that have a substantial amount of other amounts of survivability. Alright, so that's what Oppressive Gloom does. It stuns every enemy around you while taking your own health. It's very useful if you're not at soft cap defense. It's very useful as a fallback for when you lose soft cap defense. So why skip Oppressive Gloom if it's a really good power on the Scrapper? Well, I didn't go into it during the build video on the Scrapper. Instead, I kind of focused on, I had gotten to a point where I had soft caps to smashing, lethal, fire, cold, and AoE defense. And basically what that means is for a spines, anything that's targeting with a ranged attack, a smashing attack, a lethal attack, a fire attack, or a cold attack is only going to hit the minimum number of times that it is possible for those attacks to hit. Attacks will hit, they will just hit as less often as is possible inside the game engine, or as less often as the player can force it. So a significant amount of the build time was spent trying to figure out where to put slots to retain those bonuses, but at the same time make powers useful. It's one thing to have you can have soft cap defense very easily to smashing lethal with almost any character. But just because you can does not mean that your character will be playable or will even be useful. And we'll go pick on a build. And as I find it, Alright, this was my Spine's Fire, and I tagged this as Spine Fire R7, probably not worth it. And get rid of the error. And you can see this kind of looks like it has a lot of the powers that I would normally use. It looks like a solid build. I've got smashing, lethal, melee defense. I've got um, almost within scaling proc levels of smashing, lethal, resist. Well, why did I decide that the build probably wasn't worth it? Well, first I have the hit points. I only have 15 HP per second. Other thing is endurance consumption, how much endurance I'm using, and compared to the previous builds, where are all my slots at? I've got slots buried into boxing. I've got Ripper with a full overwhelming force. I've got several obliterations in use. I'm using a full PvP set to full 5-slot Gladiator's Javelin just for knockback protection. So it's sort of like, yeah, it reached the specs, but how would this actually be to play, especially compared to the other ones that I was making? And let's go do name and looking for a specific one. Sometimes having cute names on it makes it a little easier to find. Okay, not seeing the one I'm looking for here. Dual build alt. Alright. This was a build I called Crazy. This is a Spines Energy, and you'll see that there's a lot of Spines builds that I have tags on. Crazy, not worth it, experimental, concept. And this build, I forget what I was trying to do with it, but I think I was trying to max like fire cold resist to make it a fire farmer. And you get to a point where you're going, well, how much endurance am I using? How much am I gaining? Is this approach really working? And this is a build I didn't use in game. And there's been builds I think most of the builds I've said I've used, there's a build where I have do not use printed on it. So the thing is, when you're making a build, is you're not just trying to figure out how do you keep these stats that you have, how do you make the rest of the powers useful? And in the Spine Stark video, the first stream, I did a lot of, okay, we've got these stats, I need to keep these stats, I need to keep these powers. One of the things that was very beneficial was Blistering Cold, which going deep give me a strong Smashing Lethal, give me a strong Fire Cold. Avalanche, using Avalanche and putting the AT. And another thing, especially on Scrappers, is where does the ATO proc for the Force Critical go? You really need to put it on either a cone for the most amount of targets to hit, or you need to put it on a single target attack. Well, Spines doesn't really have a traditional cone. Your cone comes very late, level 26 with Ripper, and it's such a powerful attack. Either Ripper or Spine Burst probably need to be where you probably have your Armageddon set. You can't put Armageddon. You have limited number of places to put Armageddon, and this is basically a thing with Spines in general. It is such a random mix of powers. You only have two pure melees. You got two PBAOEs you have three if you count Quills, which is a toggle PBAOE, and Quills has its own requirements because it's a toggle PBAOE. Then you have a ranged, and then you have a targeted AoE cone. So it doesn't use the PBAOE cones, you have to use the targeted AoE cone. So you have both ranged and melee powers. You don't really have a consistent setter either, and that limits your slotting selection. So whereas you might put Blistering Cold on a later melee power because it gives you such strong bonuses. It's with a full 6 slot, we're 96 to accuracy, we're red capped to accuracy and damage, we're green capped to endurance and recharge time. But then you get down to in the ATO procs on Scrappers, on Superior, or the ATO sets and Superior Scrapper Strike, 3 of these gets you 5% smashing lethal. That's a really strong smashing lethal. So you really need to break Superior Scrapper Strike up and have it on 2 different powers. Well, if you do that, now you have extra powers that you're not going to be doing full slotting on. You need to find something else to fill in those powers. And it goes kind of just snowballs from there. You have a goal you need to get to. Once you get to that goal, what can you work backwards from? What can you change in order to keep the stats that keep your character alive? And that's where we kind of come back to one of the things I could easily do in this build is just drop Unleash Potential, put in Oppressive Gloom, or Soul Transfer. If you watched the stream at one point, Soul Transfer was down here with a Preventative Medicine proc, and eventually I'd swapped it out for Unleash Potential. Well, why did I do that since I didn't really explain it? Well, as I'm going through the slots, I need to make sure that so we're going to run through the Spine Stark Armor. Why did I choose these powers for this build? And we're going to take a second here. Okay. Steamy text messages. Give me a second to recompose myself after reading that one. All right, let's go park our Dark Tank here in a farm, so at least she's doing something while I'm working. And search more, completed. Yes, there we go. Check her difficulty level. Yeah, plus 48x. Of course she is. Alright, and just park her right there. I'm actually going to turn Oppressive Gloom off for this because she doesn't need it. Alright, so going back to the Scrapper. First thing, took Lunge because it's a relatively quick melee. Barb Swipe is arguably a quicker melee if we do a lockout on it. This was something I looked at in during the stream. Barb Swipe has a cast time of 0.83 seconds, and Lunge has a cast time of 1.63 seconds, so Barb Swipe is arguably quicker. One of the things you quickly run into, though, is recharge time, animation constraints, and what other powers can you use. If you're building an attack chain, that is how many powers you use in a row, simply having the quickest powers may not actually get you a very good chain. One of the things you can look at is you can do windows, power graphs, and then you can do damage per animation. And I'll tell you roughly how much damage a power does per animation. Now, off the bat, base, Barb Swipe actually does more damage per animation than Lunge. But going backwards, Barb Swipe does more damage per second than Lunge. And how are we looking at damage on end? And damage per endurance, Barb Swipe and Lunge are about the same. So in terms of damage per animation or damage per second, Barb Swipe does theoretically offer a better base. But in the time that it takes Barb Swipe to recharge, since it's very, very quick, is another power that you're going to use while you're waiting for Barb's Swipe to come back up going to have recharged, or is it going to have finished animating? Okay, so, well, Spine Burst has an cast time of 3 seconds. Impale has a cast time of 2.43 seconds. Um, Ripper has a cast time of 2.17. Throw Spines has a cast time of 1.63. Dark Blast has a cast time of 1 second. So, out of all of the powers that you could possibly use in an attack chain, the powers that you're going to probably be using are probably going to recharge as you cycle through powers, because you're probably going to have to toss in Dark Regeneration, which has a cast time of 1.17 seconds. You're probably going to be pulling off Spine Burst. You know, if you're focused on a single target, yeah, you could probably just throw Barb Swipe on auto, and actually that may not be a bad idea if you're trying to maximize single target damage without using any other power. But that was why I went with Lunge. And this is one where, okay, actually looking at the numbers and looking at how it plays in game, you know, maybe there are arguments to be made for Barb Swipe. But I can also tell you the eventual reason why I did settle on Lunge, and this is because of practical experience, the set that I'm actually using here. I don't have a lot of melee options, pure melee options. So I'm using Blistering Cold. Now, Blistering Cold's proc, how many times it comes up, chance for proc, is based on the base recharge of a power. The longer the base recharge is, the more often the proc will actually take effect. Now, Barb Swipe's base recharge is 3 seconds, Lunge's base recharge is 6 seconds. So, on average, Lunge will give you more chances for Superior Blistering Cold to actually proc than Barb Swipe. But since it's only 3 procs per minute, which means 1 proc every 20 seconds, you really would want to have Blistering Cold any power that takes 20 seconds to recharge, or something like 15 seconds or 18 seconds, some long recharge power. But you don't get those, you don't get a power like that in Spines. So that was why I went with Lunge, is it, for the powers that I got, it offers the most practical chances for Blistering Cold to fire. So moving on to Dark Embrace, we have Aegis Resistance Endurance for the Fire Cold defense, and we have Steadfast Protection for the defense. And Death Shroud, now this is a toggle, it is a damage over time toggle. So the first thing we want to do is get the endurance down. So I've got Fear of the Gladiator, the strongest endurances I can get here. The damage endurance recharge and the accuracy endurance recharge. And we're also taking the chance resistance debuff. So any enemy that's within the tower takes a resist debuff. And then on the other hand, we also have the flat global bonus, Superior Scrapper Critical Strike. Again, we have the strongest endurance reduction, damage endurance recharge, and we're also picking up damage recharge and critical hit bonus. So we've got a lot of recharge in a power that, well, really doesn't benefit from recharge. But we are into green cap on damage and endurance discount. I'm actually doing really good on damage on endurance and discount at 78%. And you know, if you get stunned, and that does happen, and Death Shroud turns off, well, it comes back up very quickly. Alright, so Murky Cloud picks up Unbreakable Guard just for the plus max HP proc and for the defense. Spine Burst has gone over earlier in the stream, and in the previous stream, this went deep purely for the recharge time, the damage buff, and the defense. At 4 slots, you can't double up on superior critical strikes. But the key here is that proc, that 50% critical proc, which basically forces, if you put this on a cone or a PBAOE, chances are if you're in a mob, you're going to get a critical strike for your next hit. Now, I personally would have, on Spines, would have preferred this on a single target power with a higher cast time, because at 3 seconds cast time, spine burst. Well, you may target spine burst, and the critical proc will go off. It won't necessarily go off at the end of the power when the attack actually connects, which is a timing issue. And this is also why you won't put this proc in a toggle overtime damage power, because the proc can go off while you're in the middle of an animation, and if that happens, this global chance proc doesn't last very long. You can actually, and I had this on my Spine's Fire Scrapper. I had this proc in, I think Fire Aura, and then I tried it in Quills, and in both ones, it'd go off. I'd be in the middle of an animation, and by the time the animation completed, the proc window had closed. Build up just picks up the Gaussian proc build up, Obsidian Shield, picks up Aegis for the defense, Impale. Now this is a Ice Mistral's Torment is a relatively recent set. This gives us our AoE and Fire Cold defense at a deep slotting. It gives us some extra recharge. Now, because it's a slow power, it goes in any power that takes us slow. Doesn't necessarily have to be a ranged, a melee, PBOE, cone, doesn't matter. It just, Ice Mistral's Torment cares whether or not the power has a slow component. Well, Impale has a slow component. So we look at Impale, it's got a 2.43 second cast time. We're running red ED cap on damage. We're doing pretty good, 81% on endurance discount, and we're actually doing pretty good on the slow discount at 66.25%. So anything that's hit with this, go into effects, our recharge time lowers the recharge time of anything we're up against, and also lowers its fly speed and run speed. So double bonus. Using Impale against a hardened target will keep it close enough. So in theory, the attack would be Impale, Lunge, or Barb Swipe, and then probably Dark Blast, and you could probably cycle between those. Impale, Barb Swipe, Dark Blast, Barb Swipe, Impale, Barb Swipe, Dark Blast, Barb Swipe, Impale, or Impale, Lunge, Dark Blast, Lunge, Impale, Lunge, Dark Blast, Lunge, Impale. Just like that. If you're trying to maximize an attack chain on just 3 powers on a single target, that's how you would do it. At least that's how you would do it in this case. Mighty Leap picks up Blessing of the Zephyr for both the range defense, which we're not really pressing anywhere on range defense or energy and negative defense. But we are getting into, since we're into the mid-20s, if we're playing with like an ice or a force field, cold domination or a force field, we should be doing pretty good on energy defense in those cases. But really this is here for the knockback protection and the endurance reduction. Dark Regeneration, it picked up the proc for chance plus endurance, and this is to counter the average delta between recovery and end drain, because we're only running 3 end per second recovery on a 2.2 per second drain. That's because of all of the toggles we got going. So Dark Regeneration, picking up Theft of Essence, gives us another way to bring some endurance back. Combat Jumping, well, this is here for air control with our travel power and for defense. Moving on, Cloak of Darkness, and this is where you've got to go into options, configuration, effects, and math, and make sure that attack is checked, and then you get your values for what you'd be like in the middle of a fight. Cloak of Darkness, it gives us defense, so we're picking up a 3-slot Luck of the Gambler to get as much endurance down as we can, and pick up the regeneration and hit points. Maneuvers picks up the Luck of the Gambler proc, and we go Shield Wall here, again, regeneration hit points, and for that Shield Wall proc. Now, because we are running maneuvers as a pull power, it's not actually giving us a lot of defense. Space is only 2.28, so it doesn't matter how much we boost it, it's not really going anywhere. But this also does help our teammates. And Quills, our second toggle AoE damage. Now, this one, we're not doing as well on the endurance discount. We are doing a bit better on the damage and the accuracy, at least compared to Death Shroud. And because Quills also gives us a minus speed, minus recharge component. Now, what you need to know is that the recharge debuff generates run little girl run syndrome in enemies. This is why Spines is not a really good taunting set, because depending on what powers you've taken with Quills, you may be able to overcome your taunt with the run little girl run uh, demoralization components. So just something to keep in mind. If you're playing a Spines and wondering Spines Brute or a Spines Tank, and you're just wondering why are enemies running away from me, I'm a tank or I'm a Brute. I've got Taunt, I've got Punch Folk, I've got Gauntlet. Why are enemies running? That's because your debuff is overcoming the taunt amount. Now taunt is supposed to erase debuff. It doesn't always work. Uh, and you may not see anything in a solo environment, but you may get with a team with another strong to buffer, and then you can morale shatter enemies very easily. So that's something to keep in mind, especially when you're playing a Spines, is you can contribute to the demoralization of the enemy. And there actually is a command to bring up and watch the demoralization on a target. I forget what it is. It's probably on Paragon Wiki somewhere if you're really interested in that. Next up, Ripper. Now, as discussed earlier, Ripper is one of the few PBAOEs that you get. Now, because it's a cone and it's so late in the build, this probably isn't the best place to have a the ATO proc, and part of that is because of the sheer amount of damage that it does. Uh, Spine Burst comes back up in 5.25 seconds. With a base recharge 16 seconds. Ripper has a lower recharge. Now, what that means in terms of procs per minute, because Superior Critical Strikes has a 4 proc per minute, it's going to go off most often on powers that are closer to 20 seconds base recharge time. At 16 seconds base recharge time versus Ripper's 11 seconds base recharge time, you will get the Superior Critical Strikes crit chance more often on Spine Burst than you will on Ripper. Now, if we look at our chance for fire damage, it's got a 4.5 procs per minute. So that means that we've gone from 20 seconds, or give me no, we're starting at base 60, sorry. Base 60, recharge time 4 ppm. Sorry, that's 15 seconds. All right, anything over 15 seconds base recharge time. Wow, I just really screwed up the math in my head there. Don't ask why I was going off 100 seconds. Going off of 60 seconds, 4 proc per minute gives us 15 seconds. So anything over 15 seconds is going to give us a chance for the proc to go off. So Spine Burst should be every time it comes up, it should be within the ppm, the proc per minute, because its base recharge is over the proc per minute base to trigger a critical strike. Ripper, because it's under 15 seconds, but we do 60 divided by 4.5, and this time I'm going to trust a calculator. 60 divided by 4.5 gives us 13.33. Ripper is just under at 11 seconds base the ppm on Armageddon fire damage. But this does mean for, excuse me a second. All right, practically, this does mean practically speaking that most of the time that Ripper will go off or that you use Ripper, it'll have the highest chance to run Armageddon out of the PPAOE powers that you can possibly put this on. Another consideration is endurance discount. Both of these are at 49.6% or 40, 41, 49. Okay, they're both in the 40%. And on our toggles, we are 56%, 78%. So something else that you kind of want to just look at is what are your toggle values looking like? Kick. Again, we don't really have a whole lot of melee powers to go with. I need kick or boxing to unlock tough and weave for later in the build. So I have to put kick or boxing somewhere in place of, say, lunge, even though lunge could take an ATO. So this picks up the kinetic combat for defense. And then we're on to tough, which picks up gladiator's armor for the knockback protection and the defense proc. Throw spines, a targeted AoE. We need, or we're looking for, our secondary is fire cold defense, which gives us AoE, or smashing lethal, but there's not really a whole lot in the targeted AoE set that offers any smashing lethal defense except for the ATOs. So since we can work towards another, we've gone with Frozen Blast for that strong AoE and strong fire cold defense. Moving on to Confront, it just picks up chance for side damage. Weave. Now this is something where I would probably actually change this. Thinking about it, I would move Kismet to Cloak of Darkness, or I'd move Kismet to Maneuvers, or I'd move Kismet to Combat Jumping. Now the thing is, right now, if I put it on Cloak of Darkness, which is the lowest toggle defense power that you're going to have on probably all of the time, could move it to Combat Jumping, but this, or if you do put it on, basically if you have it on Cloak of Darkness or Combat Jumping, you'll still get the Kismet proc if it's attuned in Positron Task Force. If you put it in Maneuvers, you may or may not get the proc in Synapse Task Force. And you may, but I'm thinking you might not. So that's where, if keeping that in mind, I would have moved if I had noticed this before, I'd have moved the Kismet down. I think I moved Weave down a bit, but moving the Kismet around to get it as early as possible. And then on Weave, we're picking up reactive defense for scaling resist damage. And then after Weave, we're on to our pool powers, or what powers do we want to have left? Well, we kind of already know, and we're just going to lock this off as Spine's Dark Armor R3 since we've already made some changes. We already know, looking through the rest of the powers, that we get a hold or a single target attack. If we go Body Mastery, we'd have to take 3 powers to get to physical protection, I think. If we do Conserve Power, okay, if we do Conserve Power, we could pick up Physical Perfection. But now we've lost a place to have that. Well, we could maybe go nasty with Synapse's Shock and Physical Perfection and pick up some recharge time and some increased run speed, but Conserve Power doesn't really give us anything, and Focused Accuracy is going to just rock too much endurance drain out. Darkness Mastery, okay, we've got a Hold, we've got Dark Blast. Originally I had Tenebris Tentacles for the TAOE. Leviathan, we do get a pet with Water Spout, but in this case it just gives us targeted AoE. And then we'd either have, well, if we took Spirit Shark, yeah, stop that. Get on there. We took Spirit Shark, we could, or Water Spout, we could get to Hibernate, which would again give us some places to put health or defense. I mean, Hibernate would be interesting, but doesn't really fit with Spines or Dark. Mace Blast, well, doesn't really give us a whole lot to work with. We do get a Hold. Moo Mastery, we could do Zap and then Ball Lightning, which, yeah, there's some value in here, and it's something that's kind of funny to me, and I have done this with a character. Running Power Transfer gives us a decent amount of damage. I notice I didn't plus these, even though I could have. We pick up some recharge time. We pick up some regeneration. This does kind of leave Zap hanging out in the wilderness. Zap, we can also do a Synapses Shotgun, or we could do an Apocalypse, or actually do Moo Bolts and Damage Endurance and Accuracy Damage Recharge. And that would be interesting as well. You lose a little bit of recharge, losing the purple, or losing the full Apocalypse, and losing Basilisk Gaze, or the 5-slot Apocalypse. But you do pick up an additional chance to heal yourself off of targets, and you do pick up some more PBOE damage if you unleash this in a mob that's right around you. So Moo Bolts, Ball Lightning would actually be an interesting combination for spines. Soul Mastery, Moonbeam is a great snipe, and you could unlock Shadow Meld. So we could put slots back in Moonbeam, pick up the Apocalypse Damage Endurance, Accuracy Damage Recharge, fill that all the way out, then in Shadow Meld. I could pick up another look at the Gambler. Let's see. Okay, we just hit a red cap. So we're actually already at the Luck of the Gambler cap. So that wouldn't do us a whole lot of good. But what we could do is drop a slot from Maneuvers. Move our proc there. Actually, for Shadow Meld, maybe do Defense Recharge. Defense or Endurance Recharge to maximize our recharges. And now we've got slots that we can maybe put somewhere else. What can we now do with this? Well, we could increase our quills with another Ice Mistral's Torment. Lower that damage some more with inaccuracy damage endurance. Still got one more slot to play with. And we could also maybe pick up some more in Theft of Essence, maybe? Accuracy and endurance healing. Lower the endurance cost there. And that would actually be an interesting take. Pick up a snipe, pick up another O kitty litter power. And if you hit Shadow Meld in there, you're basically soft capped to everything. What's our recharge look like? Recharge is 33 seconds with the duration of 15 seconds. And, if you wanted to go this way, we could drop Unleashed Potential, pick up Oppressive Gloom, drop this slot in Quills, slots enhancement, slots auto-arrange all slots, and then you could just pick up Oppressive Gloom, chance to hit the buff or anything within range, and Endurance Stun. Let's do window sets and bonuses. We are not capped. Alright, so there we go. Actually, if we take the slot back off of Dark Regeneration, put it back on Maneuvers, and we could pick up Luck of the Gambler again. Okay. There we go. It's didn't really change much, actually. We undid some of the changes that we did make, but now we've basically kept everything else the same, and now we've picked up Shadow Meld, and we picked up Oppressive Gloom. That would be one way to do that. So save this as Soul. Then let's open our R3 back up. All right. What other ones could we look at? Weapon Mastery. Now, Weapon Mastery on Stalkers gives you physical perfection. Weapon Mastery on Scrappers does not, which is problematic. I'd really love to know what the logic was behind that, but I think I would be safe in saying there wasn't really a whole lot of logic on that decision. So, Weapon Mastery, we could pick up Web Grenade. Whoops. We could do Web Grenade. What? Oh, get out of totals and info. There we go. Web Grenade. And then targeting drone has the same problem as focused accuracy. It just drains a lot of endurance on a build. It's already going to be maybe a little hard to pull back. We do pick up Shirokin, which is only minor damage though, or we pick up Caltrops. What can we get with this? Well, with 5 slots, we could do a Ragnarok, or we could do another Ice Mistral's Torment. Now, Ice Mistral's Torment on Caltrops is actually kind of funny, because we pick up some recharge, we pick up some slow, Web Grenade. We could also pick up some slow here. So we could do Ice Mistral Torment at 3. And we'll do accuracy, damage, endurance, and endurance slow. And this gives us some extra accuracy and some more hit points. Windows set some bonuses. Okay. So yeah, if you did Weapon Mastery, you could get a kind of interesting here. Some other changes. If let's say we drop Unleash Potential for now, and you could take Exploding Shirokin. Don't have a lot of slots to put in there. Could take Targeting Drone, but again, a lot of endurance that it uses. All right. So we'll just do this as weapon. All right, let's go back and grab her. Let's go back to our 3 build and let's have another look at Leviathan with Hibernate. Let's make sure we're clicked on 41. Let's say we do Water Spout and then a Hibernate. Water Spout, we could pick up Artillery for range. We could pick up Ragnarok for the recharge. So let's think about Ragnarok for the recharge. Alright, and then Hibernate, well, this is one place we could put the Preventative Medicine proc. Can we get anything? We can get Fire Cold Resist. We're already yanking back Endurance Recovery and Health Recovery. So some of these other procs wouldn't really help us. We could do Synapses Shock, though. Synapses Shock in mod and in mod recharge. Alright, so that gives us regeneration recovery. We pick up some run speed, and we pick up preventative medicine. That's actually not a bad way to go. And if we're doing Hibernate, we've got an Oh Kitty Litter power. Now, it does have a long recharge time, 100 seconds recharge. That's still less time than Unleash Potential. So we could drop Unleash Potential to Oppressive Gloom. Are there any other slots we could very easily discard? Well, we could discard the Endurance modification. We probably don't need that. Do slots and enhancement slots. Auto range draw slots. That also still gives us our additional movement speed. 2 movement speeds. And then we could do chance for 2 hit debuff and endurance stun. Alright. So there's Leviathan. Dark Armor free. Leviathan. Okay. So what else do we have? Body Mastery. Well, if we do conserve power, we can pick up Physical Perfection. And we can pick up some recharge and power transfer. So we'll pull enough from conserve power to take us full slot on Physical Perfection. And this also gives us the chance to heal. But we're not picking up any attacks. We don't have any IO sets on conserve power, but we can do 2 level 50 plus 5. And we check here, we have a recharge time of 211 seconds. Physical Perfection doesn't really give us a high regen or a high recovery, but now we've picked up a proc. Again, we're not really picking up any powers. We still have Oppressive Gloom down here, so we don't really have a oh kitty litter, I'm in trouble power to get out of anything. But this does give us just keep this in mind. Regeneration right now is 17.71 HP. With Physical Perfection off, it's at 16.32 HP. If I swap this to a healing set, and we'll go with Preventative Medicine for now. And actually, you know what? Ooh, let's start over and slam this into ED cap with all our recharges. Now keep in mind that our base regeneration with Physical Perfection turned off. Turn it off. Our base regeneration is 229%. Right now, it's at 15.9 HP per second. With Physical Perfection on, it's gone to 18.7. 3 hit points per second. Wait, is that even 3 hit points? That's less than 3 hit points per second. So this is why you don't actually see Physical Perfection on a lot of high-end builds. It's not actually that good. The base regeneration is so low that even if you slam it into HD cap, especially if you're on a Stalker or a Scrapper, or even a lot of Brutes, it just doesn't get you anything. It barely moves the needle. But that's what you kind of expect from a tertiary power, and that's why I would go with power transfer, because you pick up a good recharge time, you pick up the hit points, you pick up endurance recovery, which can be a little bit more useful, especially in a toggle heavy power. Yeah, you're not picking up any attacks, but with Physical Perfection in place, I noticed I didn't boost it, but I now have 17.71 HP per second. So using a endurance set with only bonuses versus an actual healing set, I lost less than 1 HP per second regeneration. So that's why it's, if you were going to go this way, it's generally better to use an endurance set, specifically power transfer, chance to heal self, and Physical Perfection. Because it's not even including the chance for heal self, which actually puts it over Maybe Panacea gives you a higher return on 5 slots for healing, and that is kind of an option. But Physical Perfection with an endurance set will give you better returns on endurance, not regeneration. In most cases, there are some sets where if you have like Hoarfrost or Earth's Embrace, a stone, or a willpower, or a regeneration, and you can increase your maximum HP, yeah, at the top end, Physical Perfection may buy you enough regeneration to be worth slotting a regeneration set. That just normally isn't the case with almost every other set, every other power set. Alright, but we'll go ahead and save this one just for body mastery, R3 body. Alright, and we're still running Oppressive Gloom here. We don't have a get out of kitty litter power, really. So let's go back, Scrapper, R3. Okay, so Blaze Mastery would be same as Darkness. We've done Body, we've done Leviathan. We really haven't done Mace because it's basically going to be the same thing. Using a hold and using a ranged targeting. The pets generally just aren't worth it. Moo Mastery we've done with Moo Bolts and Ball Lightning. We've done Soul Mastery and we've done Weapon Mastery. So to continue on with the rest of the powers, we'll just load this back up. I'll reset back to R3. Alright, so moving on. Those are all the different options. If you notice, I didn't ever adjust the level 47 power that I took, and I took Weaken Resolve because it's a minus resist, minus defense, minus 2 hit. Now this, we'll lock this off with a right click, and it has a 12-second recharge. Give me a 12-second, about 12-second recharge time. In particular build. Now, it doesn't really do a whole lot of defense. It's only minus 7%. It doesn't do a whole lot of resist. It's only 6.25%. And does it give us a duration on 2 hit? I'm not seeing the 2 hit. Alright. Why take this power? Why didn't I touch this power at all when I was going through the other ones? Because there's not a whole lot of debuffs in the Scrapper set. And by fitting a debuff in, even if it's not a very powerful one, this may be a difference maker power. You could be very late in a TF, and it's such a late power. It's, really, is there a way I could fit this in earlier? And not really, at least not on this build. But there's been enough cases where we can resolve, and mostly this has been for me with Stalkers. It's been a go-to power just to take an edge off an opponent. And if you are solo hunting, and this is kind of one of the other big reasons why I would use it on this build and didn't bother changing it. There's not a whole lot of single target attack damage in Spines. Yeah, you do get a constant TOT in Quills. Yeah, you do get a very powerful single target attack in Impale. Yes, you do get a very quick attack in Barb Swipe. But laying down single target damage is problematic. Almost anything you can do to improve your single target damage output is probably a good thing. So that's why I didn't mess with Weaken Resolve. Yeah, it's only a pool power debuff, but it's still something to have in the toolkit. And that brings us to the final power, Unleashed Potential. Now, the reason why I went with Unleashed Potential, and actually we're going all the way back to Mighty Leap, because this is something I did talk about in the previous live stream when originally constructing this build. There's not a lot of active mitigation against incoming targets. You've got your soft cap defenses, your resist because you're a Scrapper. There are some hard caps with the... Did I even get with the reactive scaling resist proc, you'll be very close to hard cap on fire cold, hard cap on a scrapper 75%. You will be hard cap on psionic as your health lowers. Uh, but since you really have a hard cap on resist, you start after looking at other methods of mitigating damage. And one of the phrases I've used throughout this is an "oh kitty litter" power. What button do you press when everything's gone wrong and you've got to get out of there? Thing is, oppressive gloom is a toggle. It stays on. You don't just click it and, well, that's the end of the fight. You hit oppressive gloom, and, well, then you've got to go. Well, if something powers through oppressive gloom, you're going to go down anyways. And this was kind of why I looked at Mighty Leap, or why I selected Mighty Leap. Mighty Leap has Takeoff. We mouse over Takeoff. It's a PBAOE melee faux knockdown. So if you hit Takeoff, if you're in the middle of a mob, most of them will hit the ground, giving you a second to get away. And that's the advantage over, say, Super Jump. Super Jump, and this is again, what powers do we have to choose from? Well, if I take Force of Will completely out of the equation, don't even take it at all, I don't lose anything on my active defense. I'm still at my soft caps. But to get those soft caps, I need combat jumping. So I can't drop combat jumping or I lose my smashing lethal. If I drop combat jumping, I've now got to come up with something else that provides defense. Concealment's not really an option. Yeah, stealth gives me defense, but it may or may not stack with Cloak of Darkness. I believe that the two are supposed to be mutually exclusive. If you have Cloak of Darkness, you can't turn stealth on. I do know that stealth and infiltration do not stack. So that's why I'm pretty sure that stealth and Cloak of Darkness will not stack in game. And I'm already using fighting, which is my other source of defense. So to hit that soft cap, I needed to come up with 3 or 4% smashing lethal in IO sets when I have no slots left to work with, or I need combat jumping. Now, with combat jumping in play, maneuvers in play, kick, tough, and weave in play, I do have my selection of other powers. Well, I could go flight. Flight would give me hover. Why not take flight and hover? Well, you do have a number of ranged powers. You maybe could make flight work with it, but you would have to go deep all the way to evasive maneuvers in order to make flight usable, or at least for a non-ranged character, for a melee character or melee powers, you'd have to go deep to evasive maneuvers. Now, can we do that? Let's go back to info, get on 14, and we'll do fly, hover, and yes, we could go all the way down to evasive maneuvers, and this ultimately would not even really change our slotting very much. Set some bonuses. We've actually hit the luck of the gambler cap. So again, if we went this way, we could drop out of maneuvers. Put our proc there. We've now got a slot free to play with. Go to fly. We now may not necessarily need a knockback reduction, so maybe we look at something else. We have the increased fly protection, so we could do endurance flying and fly protection. We've still got a slot free to play with. We could pick up some recovery. Or do we put this, would this be more useful somewhere else? Well, we could put it in quills and pick back up some accuracy. Where would be a good place to put this? Could put in dark regeneration. Alright, so we could have some recovery and a little bit more endurance reduction. So now we've minimized, or we've maximized. We're now at 84%. We've got evasive maneuvers. Again, we don't have a oh kitty litter button, but now we could plausibly fight within melee range, and then you could take the same effect and go across all the other players. Now, at this point, you've got hover all the way down here. Could we drop combat jumping? Yes, we can drop combat jumping. So we could move hover all the way down here. We could move. What else could we move? Let's see. We can't really move kick, tough, or weave. We could move confront. All right. Or could we? No, we can't. Evasive maneuvers has to come after hover. And this is why this may work at the top end, but as a leveling build, there's way too much stuff in front of you. You're not going to have evasive movers into late. You could swap evasive movers in confront, but now once you've got Cloak of Darkness and Quills, and you start running into Demoralize, you're going to want to keep enemies close. And you could swap confront and tough. You could swap confront and kick, and that gives you confront as early as possible. And you could trade off your mid-range soft caps, or your mid-range performance, and just move Dark Blast down 1, Petrifying Glaze down 1, Weave down 1, Tough down 1, Kick down at 35, Evasive Maneuvers up. You could have Evasive Maneuvers, and now we'll do slots and enhancement slots, auto arrange all slots. Okay, so if we move Weave down, we could move Evasive Maneuvers and Maneuvers. And now you've got your flying and melee pretty early. Okay, since we've opened up a slot here, losing combat jumping, we could take a slot off of there, slots enhancement, slots auto arrange all slots. And now we could plausibly pick up Oppressive Gloom all the way down at the top end again. Now, you don't really have a way to recover the endurance drain, but it doesn't use a lot of endurance to begin with. So there we go. Window, set some bonuses, and you could maybe readjust this, as I did before, to all the other sets. So that's how you could make this power work with Fly, and still get the same stat bonuses for Smashing Lethal, Fire Cold, and AoE defense. So we'll lock this off as Dark Armor 3, R3, Flight. Okay. Would I personally make this particular build? Oh, I wouldn't. I would actually probably change Oppressive Gloom for Soul Transfer, put in Preventative Medicine proc, and hang on. Alright, that's a 911. So that's enough variance on this. So to answer the original question at the end of this, for the specific building question, Oppressive Gloom didn't actually add anything that wasn't. If you needed to get out of a fight quickly, Oppressive Gloom won't get you out of the fight. If you're already at a soft cap defense, Oppressive Gloom won't necessarily buy you any more survivability. going deep on experimentation gave me both an active mitigation in the middle of a fight, take off, sorry guys, knocked down, I got to get out of here. It also gave me a debuff to help my teammates at the top end, which we can resolve. And then for that final power, I could pick up a look at a Gambler proc for extra recharge. And also have an kitty litter power, something's gone wrong. I need to get out of here now. So giving multiple escape options. So I hope that answers the question. I will be posting all of these builds onto the forums later. And I will catch you later since I've now got to go deal with